In 2017, an increasing number of companies reported they did not have effective insider threat detection methods. LogRhythm's UEBA solutions enable you to detect and neutralize user-based threats in real time, while built-in scenario and behavior-based analytics empower you to expose insider threats, compromised accounts, and privilege misuse. Visit LogRhythm.com to learn how their UEBA solutions can help you expand visibility and enhance detection capabilities. Domain tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/securityweekly. Are you looking for high-performance data storage that's easy to use yet secure enough for the Department of Defense? Look no further. Racktop Systems gives business software-defined data storage complete with embedded compliance, security, and data encryption. Don't let cyber threats, regulatory demands, or the complexity and growth of your data overwhelm your business. Racktop's high-performance data management platform gives you the tools you need to address the most demanding data challenges. Think beyond storage. To learn more, visit racktopsystems.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. John, you actually had a couple of announcements.
I did. So I just want to let everybody know we're going to be at the SOC Summit coming up here in New Orleans at the end of the month. So we'll have a booth there. Make sure you come by and see us if you're interested in getting a personal live demo of the tool.
Is that like dress socks versus athletic socks versus?
It is. Yeah.
I just think it's funny.
I'm gonna wear my DF Lab socks. We actually don't have any. We should get some DF socks.
Yeah. I think socks, in terms, we were talking about giveaways a little bit earlier. I think socks are a pretty cool giveaway. I don't know. People seem to like them, although I question whether it is valuable branding moving forward, because oftentimes the logo on the sock, like, you don't see when people wear the socks, unless you're wearing them with shorts.
My shorts and my Crocs, they'll stand out
shorts,
nicely.
Crocs, and dress socks with the DF Labs logo on them.
Exactly.
That's making a fashion statement. Yeah. Not sure what it's exactly telling people about your fashion, but it's making a statement, and that's what's important.
Yeah, so anyway, we'll be at the SOC Summit in New Orleans here coming up at the end of the month. We'll have a booth there, and our VP, Mike Fowler, one of our VPs, is going to be doing a lunch and learn talk there. And then we'll be at Black Hat in Innovation City, so you can come check us out there if you're not going to be at the SOC Summit, but you'll be making it a Black Hat. And I actually have an Arsenal talk on Thursday at Black Hat, where we'll be releasing a free tool to kind of help automate running live tools during incident response on a host. So you get all these tools that you've got scripted and everything to try to grab live data. We've got a free tool we're going to be debuting there and talking about that'll help you kind of automate some of that data
now
collection.
The Arsenal talks are for free and open source tools only. Correct. And they're run during Black Hat at specific times during the day. Do you have multiple sessions or just one session?
No, just the one session on Thursday. I think it's at 1 or 2 o'clock.
You'll see it in the schedule. Yeah,
it'll be
like
in
a
the
30-minute slot that you have.
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Those tend to be the coolest talks.
Yeah.
At Black Hat.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, there's the big research and all the other talks that are happening, and that stuff's interesting. I think the really interesting and cool research that is free and open source is happening at the Arsenal talks. I actually really like to read the news at Black Hat about what was happening at the Arsenal talks and attend Arsenal talks, because I think they're really cool.
Well, that's the stuff I can take home and use tomorrow from the Arsenal talks. You know what I mean? I can go download that tool or implement that, and I can do that the next day. We know there's vulnerabilities in cars and IoT devices, and all that stuff is interesting and certainly important for our industry and our community, but I think our audience certainly would appreciate those Arsenal talks. So if you're going to Black Hat, definitely check those out and check out John's. Look for that in the schedule. Check it out.
Awesome. We got some security news to talk about, John. The first is Alert Logic has made a pivot into container security. And what I find interesting is they're touting intrusion detection capability for containers. They're going to support AWS, including Docker, Amazon's Elastic Container Service, Kubernetes, CoreOS, and AWS Elastic Beanstalk. I'm not even quite sure what that is, to be honest with you. And support for additional stuff will be coming soon. Their console will now display which containers and hosts might be compromised, along with the associated metadata. And it's interesting as they call it like network protection, but of course your container network is very different from what we would think of as a traditional network.
Right.
And it's nice that they're integrating with the orchestrators because, and it depends on how the implementation goes, right? But you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into a solution that's going to make it hard for you to move or change your architecture, where if it's incorporated in the orchestrator, typically your deployment doesn't matter, right? It's providing insights regardless of how you're deploying your containers. So I thought it was a pretty cool announcement from Alert Logic, an interesting pivot for that company to start playing in the waters of container security.
Yeah, I think it'll be cool. I mean, I know you guys have talked about it on the show before. It's such a gray area, that sort of container security. Everybody's still kind of figuring it out. And,
Sure.
And, myself coming from an IR and a forensics background, I look at containers in that aspect as well. And I think there's even less right now around, container forensics and being able to do IR because they are so fluid and dynamic, getting those forensic artifacts. So I think something like this would really play well in that space as well, not only detecting those sort of, vulnerabilities and attacks and things like that, but it sounds like actually having some sort of, logging or, some evidence to come back to once that's happened and try to actually do an investigation on that. So
and knowing which ones are suspect, is part of the game. But then to do forensics, right, you got to capture that, pull that image out, or that actually the image or the running image, and then do forensics on it. But you only get you get the container, but that's like a piece of it, right? Like the kernel is still doing a lot of the work because the container is just the application. So you do get some binaries and stuff like that to analyze like you traditionally would, having done some light forensics on a container that was compromised. It's pretty similar to doing forensics on a Linux box, but you don't have all of the necessary components, right, that are there. Like you might not get core dumps. Not sure that core dumps and stuff like some of the things you'd expect to be there are not going to be there when you do forensics on a container.
Right. So. But on the network level too, obviously there's an abstraction, another network layer abstraction when
it's
you
like
get
a network within a network, yes.
And so your traditional networking tools don't really have visibility into that level. So something like this is actually going to give you those network artifacts.
Yes.
So you can then go back to and hopefully do some postmortem.
Absolutely. Next up, StackRox on the container front has made some announcements that, they're trying to really push left, right? And I think this is a trend in a lot of security companies and trying to incorporate development, not just IT security. And I think when you're a container security company, you gotta have that developer and IT operations audience captured, because if you're in a full DevOps environment, you're pushing using containers or any kind of microservices architecture, you're really combining, if it's security, right, combining security people with your IT operations people with your developers. And, so this announcement from StackRox is, that's just, it's kind of like common sense. You've got to appeal to those audiences because all three of those teams now are working together to provide that infrastructure and provide security. And performance and uptime and the whole thing. So you got to have those various personas as your audience. And their announcement was basically, inside their console, like what can they take advantage of? So you see Signal Sciences and talking with them, doing similar things in incorporating other teams. And what I really like about that too, at Signal Sciences specifically, which is more about the application rather than the container. But, when you appeal to those other audiences, developers and IT operations people care probably more about performance and availability than they do security. And certainly security is going to impact that, right? But if you in your console can show them performance metrics, they're going to use your tool, right? It also, what Zane Lackey was talking about is when you are a security person and you're pitching your developers and your IT ops people, hey, we should use this security tool. Like we should use something like StackRox or our sponsors, Layered Insight, love their technology and their approach. When you're working with them, like if they can show you performance metrics, when the dev or IT ops says, well, how's that security solution going to impact our performance? You can say, well, it's being measured inside the product. So if you're questioning how it's impacting performance, you can actually use that product like Signal Sciences, and it'll tell you how the application is performing, right? And how it's impacting performance or not. Because everyone, you blame the firewall, right? When something slows down or isn't working, you're like, oh, it must be the firewall. Like this is the new incarnation of that. Like it must be your security solution that's in there. So,
right. Yeah, and I think you're right. It does. I mean that containers really kind of make everybody come together. Hopefully, come together. I mean, your dev team has some security responsibilities, and vice versa. And I think as we've started to grow into that, people don't understand those cross-functional roles quite as well. And so a tool like this that allows people to collaborate together and see, gives the security team exposure to the development side and vice versa. I think hopefully we'll hope kind of fill that gap a little bit.
So McAfee has announced their new enterprise security portfolio, and it seems that they are very focused on a few different areas, right? They're EPO, right, which we've talked about in the previous segment. Their endpoint, so they call it MVision Endpoint. I thought EPO was their endpoint kind of play. I'm not sure why those are separate.
Yeah, it looks like they've got, so down at the bottom it says they've got MVision EPO, MVision Endpoint, and MVision Mobile.
Endpoint must be their antivirus.
Yeah, I think that's their AV.
Yeah. They don't want to call it AV because
you're right. It's their endpoint
AV.
protection.
Oh my God, I don't want AV. I want next generation endpoint protection. So they're like, yeah, we got that.
Exactly.
And EPO is their orchestration management of that. And then I want to say they made an acquisition to play in the mobile space. They've got some kind of MDM.
Yeah, I don't remember, but
I
right.
like vaguely remember that. Yeah. But I mean, they're really repositioning the company to play more in the enterprise security space, and they've made a lot of product changes over the past few years. One of which was like they end of life their security scanner. Mm-hmm. I forget the history of where that came from. McAfee's security scanner was a product that and someone's probably listening to screaming the name in their car, right? But they did that, and then they end of life that product a while ago. When I was working for Tenable, I was following that pretty closely, right? Mm-hmm. But now they're solidifying that on moving forward as those three things, which I think is kind of interesting. It's certainly something to watch how, especially McAfee plays with the other new and up and coming endpoint companies and such. So I think as analysts, we're kind of still on the fence. Like, not everyone gets the recommendation like, hey, you should dump your traditional AV or endpoint and go with something new. That's a custom decision, I think, for every enterprise, right?
It's hard.
Your rip and replace costs are high, right?
Oh yeah. You're the time you spend, and not to mention the straight financial investment. So it's a tough decision, and I think most people just kind of end up staying. It's not worth getting that extra 20%. The new cutting edge features when we've got a product like a McAfee or something like that in place that can do 80% of it, and we don't have to spend the next 2 months re-imaging all of our endpoints and or pushing this out and re-architecting our whole security program.
So ThreatConnect has updated its playbooks, and I think this is kind of competition to DF Labs, but I find it interesting where some of the SOAR platforms are born from, right? Like, obviously, DF Labs has a history in incident response and forensics. I think to differentiate themselves in the threat intelligence space in the market, ThreatConnect is trying to put those playbooks and allow people to automate within the threat intelligence platform itself. And they're very heavily messaging on that as kind of like their pivot, right? From the threat intelligence straight play into, well, we're allowing you to automate a little more. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I think it's still very much threat intel focused, where some of the other platforms allow for a lot more flexibility Although I haven't seen ThreatConnect's product in some time, but.
Yeah, it wasn't entirely clear to me kind of what at what level they're orchestrating with, right? It kind of sounds like maybe they're going to orchestrate just and automate the, like you said, the threat intelligence aspects of their platform. Whether they're planning to go out from there or not, who knows? But I think that's great. I think automation and orchestration is fantastic, and we do it kind of at a across the security environment. But we actually integrate with other orchestration and automation tools. Network orchestration and automation, kind of that policy management, is becoming a much more popular thing. We integrate now. We just did an integration with Tufin, who's great for that kind of policy management on the network side. And they do automation and orchestration, but they're certainly not a competitor of ours. We actually work very well together as integrated partners.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can get specific as to where you apply the automation and orchestration.
Exactly. I mean, when you start looking at things like network policy management and things like that, that's a very, very in-depth topic and a very very specific use case that it's not necessarily bad to have a vendor that focuses specifically on that. So I think ThreatConnect coming out with this, I think that's great if they can automate and orchestrate some of that. We integrate already with ThreatConnect. Yeah. So I'm excited to see how that's going to help us as well.
BitGlass and Okta have made a partnership for advanced access and security in the cloud. I think this is just kind of a natural progression. Okta is obviously a big player in the market in terms of single sign-on, and integrating that with your CASB certainly makes sense. I don't think there's anything really more I wanted to say on that one. I did want to talk about Optiv launches a new managed identity service to protect privileged accounts, and I think this is an area where a lot of organizations can really benefit, because privileged identity management, identity and access management, is that like a huge project or what, right? Like there's a lot that you have to understand and implement. And if you can now outsource some of that, and I don't know if the article says which vendors they're working with or if they have their own solution. I don't think the article really indicated that. But that I would recommend enterprises look at that, certainly, because it's such a critical thing for you to have in your security portfolio. And I also feel like, we've talked a lot about integrations, John. It's not very well integrated into other solutions. A lot of enterprises I talk to, we talk about various topics. When it comes time to where I'm like, we need to understand the user's privilege, or maybe revoke privileges, or take action. Like, you need to integrate with your PIM. I'm like, oh, do you have one of those? And a lot of times it's like at the end of the call, yeah, we have that, but it's not fully implemented, or it's only implemented for this specific users, or we haven't fully integrated in our environment. Now, if you can get some external help via an MSSP, maybe it's not so much the management you're struggling with, but it's the integrations into everything that you're struggling with, and offsetting that with an MSSP, or just a reminder to everyone that needs to be integrated in your process. I'm sure you've seen this, John, in your various integrations, right? Like if I want to integrate with a CyberArk, for example, and say if this user is being, bad, UBA is a UEBA or whatever, they've seen it both ways, right? User behavior analytics, users' credentials are being abused. Now I need to go reach out to my CyberArk or whatever, the million different options you have for that, and turn off a user account. Like we talked about in the Active Directory sense, but if you've got a privileged or identity and access management solution, that's certainly an integration point.
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at integrating with some of those as well. And I think you're right. I think, that back when I was doing incident response and everything, you see that kind of implemented, but it's over in a corner somewhere because we had to do something specific for this group or meet this specific regulation, or somebody said we should have that somewhere. So we kind of did it. It's implemented. We checked the box and it's over there. So I think this will be great.
Absolutely. The last one is, and I don't know, we've speculated already this week on the network about what CA technologies being bought by Broadcom really means. This is we talk about acquisitions. We're not typically talking about the $18.9 billion that Broadcom is going to purchase CA, right? Typically, our acquisitions are much less. So I thought it was interesting, just for one, the sheer size and scope of an acquisition. Then, of course, when we talk about acquisitions, what does that mean for our enterprise clients that are using some type of CA technology, which, of course, now extends down into Veracode? I don't see any indications that much would change, especially an acquisition at this level. But who knows?
Yeah, I'd agree. It's an interesting acquisition for sure. I don't see an immediate play there. I don't know if they're looking for the technology, some of CA's technology, or trying to integrate into some of their hardware stuff that they manufacture. But
right.
with the amount of people out there using CA, I can't imagine that there's going to be any huge impact, especially initially on those. I can't imagine them really changing things up a whole lot and throwing everybody for a loop here.
Yeah. That's it. So you guys will be at Black Hat in Innovation City.
We will,
which is awesome.
We will. Love to see everybody there.
I've been an exhibitor in Innovation City. It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's awesome. It's a great way to make the most out of your Black Hat experience when you're kind of a newer startup. And get you on the floor. So
I've been to Black Hat for past couple of years and in my kind of previous employments, but I'm looking forward to being up.
It's another space where I like to. We've even talked about in the RSA aspect, right? It's a place where I encourage folks to spend time, right? Spend some time in Innovation City, and RSA has a similar area in their conference. Spend some time at the Arsenal Talks. It's kind of like a different kind of Black Hat rather than going to the large vendors and going to the large talks. Like, sure, there's value there, but I think the cooler things that are happening in our industry are happening in Innovation City. They're happening at the Arsenal Talks. So
yeah, absolutely, and especially for me, as a product manager, right? That's the stuff I love seeing. What other people are doing? What new stuff is coming out? Where do we want to make integrations? What's coming out in the industry, and what are people looking for? That kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely, I spend a lot of time there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John, and thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. See everyone next time.